How's it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the most rare and valuable coins in Canada. Today, we're going to be taking a look at something a little bit different. These are 15 common Canadian coins that you might actually be carrying around in your pocket change or your wallet right now, but they are actually worth way more than you might think. Now, these aren't the ultra rare 1 in a million coins. These are the everyday pieces hiding in plain sight, quietly sitting in your wallet or your change jar just waiting to be discovered. Some of these have interesting minting errors, others have unique varieties or low mintages, and a few might just even have that collector's value that makes them worth way more than face value. Now, if you do find one of these coins, you could be looking at a nice little payday. In this video, we will break down each of these different coins, explain how to spot them, and what kind of value you can expect if you're lucky enough to come across one. Before we do get into this, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can stay up to date with all of my latest content. And don't forget to stick around until the end of the video because some of these coins are going to surprise you with how much they are worth today. And then without any further ado, what do you say we get right into it? These are 15 common Canadian coins worth big money that could be hiding in your pocket change. Let's get it, guys. Recently, collectors have been buzzing about a fascinating new discovery in Canadian coin collecting, the 1989 Canadian dime with a 180-degree rotated die. This error, also known as a coin alignment error, occurs when the reverse side of a coin is misaligned with the obverse side by 180 degrees, causing the design of the blue nose schooner on the reverse to appear upside down in relativity to the portrait of Queen Elizabeth on the obverse. This error happens when one of the dies used to strike the coins becomes improperly aligned during the minting process. Canadian coins are usually struck with two dies, one for the obverse, which will feature the portrait of the current monarch, at the time it was Queen Elizabeth II, and another one for the reverse, which for Canadian dimes showcases the portrait of the blue nose schooner. These dies are supposed to be perfectly aligned, so when you flip the coin top to bottom, both sides should remain upright. In the case of the 1989 coin alignment dime, the reverse die was rotated 180 degrees, resulting in the error being created. Such minting mistakes can occur due to improper setup of the dies or failure to correct an existing misalignment. Though errors like this are rare because of the mint's strict quality control measures, the 180-degree rotation is particularly dramatic and noteworthy, which makes it highly desirable for collectors. Errors like this can happen for a number of reasons. The most common cause is improper setup of the dies during the minting process. In some rare cases, the dies may shift during production, and if this shift goes unnoticed, it can result in a batch of coins with rotated designs. The Canadian Mint usually employs strict quality control measures to prevent errors like these from occurring and escaping the mint facility, but no system is perfect. As a result, a few error coins like the 1989 dime with a rotated die still manage to make their way into circulation. Identifying the 1989 Canadian dime rotated die error is relatively straightforward once you know what to look for. One of the easiest ways to check for this error is by using a simple tool like a cardboard coin flip. Start by placing the dime into the flip, making sure that the obverse side, which will have the portrait of the Queen, is facing upright. Once the coin is secured in the flip, hold it steady and flip the entire coin flip over without changing the orientation of the coin itself. If the reverse side, featuring the design of the blue nose schooner, appears upside down, you've likely found the 180-degree rotated error. This method is particularly useful because it helps eliminate any accidental rotation or handling error during your inspection. By keeping the coin in the same orientation while flipping the entire coin flip, you can be sure that any misalignment you see is due to a rotated die and not due to how you're actually holding or perceiving the coin. While the 180-degree rotation is the most dramatic and desirable error, it's worth noting that smaller rotations such as 45 or 90 degrees can also occur. These less extreme rotations are still considered errors, but they tend to be less valuable than the full 180-degree coin alignment error rotation. However, for serious collectors, any degree of rotation can be a noteworthy addition to your collection. And if you do find any Canadian coin with a rotated die, even if it's only by 10 or 15 degrees, I still suggest that you hold on to it, because for the investment, honestly, to find a nickel or a dime, it's only 10 cents, and if you are able to sell it to someone who's interested in coin collecting eventually, you may be able to make a decent profit off of it. So why exactly is the 1989 Canadian dime rotated die error generating so much excitement right now? One reason is the sheer rarity of this error. While the exact number of 1989 dimes with this rotated die is still unknown, errors of this magnitude typically occur in very limited quantities. Unlike common varieties or minor errors, a 180-degree rotated die is considered a significant minting mistake, and finding one in circulation would be a rare and thrilling experience for any coin roll hunter or collector. Now, what makes this discovery even more exciting is that Canadian dimes in general don't offer a lot of varieties for collectors to hunt for. Aside from the legendary 1969 large date dime, which I have covered in some previous videos, which is considered one of the most rare Canadian coins ever minted, there aren't too many high value dimes floating around in circulation. The scarcity of rare varieties means that the 1989 rotated die error adds a new level of flavor and excitement to the hobby, giving collectors another valuable piece to look for in their searches. With more of these errors popping up and making their way through the woodwork, collectors and dealers alike are starting to recognize the potential value for coins like this. This coin's rarity combined with the dramatic nature of the 180-degree rotation make it a standout piece in any air coin collection. High-grade examples of air coins like this can command significant premiums, especially if the air is as visible and striking as a full rotated die. If you do believe that you found a 1989 Canadian dime with a rotated die error, the first step is to confirm its legitimacy. While identifying the rotation is straightforward, ensuring the coin is a legitimate error and not damaged or altered is crucial. Grading companies like PCGS, NGC, or ICCS here in Canada can authenticate and certify your coin, providing a professional assessment of both its error and the overall condition. So next time you are checking your pocket change or searching through some rolls of dimes, take a moment to check for that upside down blue nose, because you never know, you might just stumble upon one of the rarest modern Canadian dimes in circulation today. Now, before we get into the values for this coin, some of the details and specifications, if any of these are off, it may indicate that it is not an authentic example. The overall mintage figure for the Canadian 1989 10-cent coin is 198,693,414. It is composed of 99.9 nickel. It is magnetic. It has a weight of 2.07 grams, a diameter of 18.03 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.16 millimeters. The edge of the coin is reeded. The usual die axis should be in metal alignment, but if you want to find the air, then it will be in coin alignment. The obverse was designed by Arnold Mockin and the reverse by Emmanuel Hahn. The mintage figure for the 1989 rotated die error is included for the overall 1989 10-cent mintage, so somewhere around 198 million dimes were made in 1989. That is a pretty high mintage figure, especially for Canadian coins, which is actually a good sign because it means that a decent number of these errors could have escaped into circulation. Now, as we get into the values for this coin, I was unfortunately not able to find any high-grade example prices, but I was able to find some low-grade prices for you guys. Just to give you guys a base price and idea, the regular 1989 can be worth around 15 cents for an AU. So that is the first price increase from its face value. It's only worth 10 cents until you get to an AU 50. But just to give you guys an idea, if you can find a 1989 dime in the coin alignment, so that is with a 180-degree rotation, it can be worth almost $400 for an AU 50. So that is not even in the mint state range, and considering the regular issue of the 1989 is only worth 15 cents in the same grade, if you were to find one of these and it did score, especially in the high mint state range, I don't doubt that you could easily get a couple $1,000s, maybe even $10,000 if it scores from an MS65 or higher. These errors, although incredibly rare and hard to find, do exist and they are out there. When I was in my coin roll hunting prime, I hunted dozens and dozens of boxes of dimes, and I was usually looking for silver in most cases. Sometimes I would put my 1969s to the side and I would give them a double look after just to see if maybe I got lucky and found the holy grail, but this is one that I would have liked to have had on my radar. I'm probably going to do some more coin roll hunts in the near future. If you guys would like to see those, just let me know down in the comments. Throughout the 2000s, there was an ongoing debate about discontinuing the production of the Canadian penny due to its high production cost and perceived lack of utility. In mid-2010, the Standing Senate Committee on National Finance initiated a study on the future of the 1-cent coin. By December 14, 2010, the Senate Finance Committee recommended removing the Canadian penny from circulation, citing a century of inflation had eroded its value and relevance. Despite a 2007 survey showing that only 37% of Canadians used pennies, the government continued to produce approximately 816 million pennies per year, amounting to 24 pennies per Canadian. The Canadian Mint had to produce larger quantities of pennies as news of their discontinuation spread and they disappeared from circulation, with many being hoarded away. In the year 2011, the Canadian Mint minted approximately 1.1 billion pennies, more than double the 2010 production of 486.2 million. In late 2010, the Senate Finance Committee members estimated that on average each Canadian had up to 600 pennies hoarded away, which had removed many from circulation. On March 29, 2012, the federal government announced in its budget that the penny would be withdrawn from circulation in the fall of 2012. The decision was based primarily on the penny's production cost of 1.6 cents. The final penny was minted on May 4, 2012 at the Royal Canadian Mint's Winnipeg facility and was entrusted to the Bank of Canada Museum in Ottawa. Existing pennies remain legal tender indefinitely, but were withdrawn from general circulation on February 4, 2013. Starting on that day, the mint began melting down an estimated 35 billion pennies that were in circulation. On this day, Google marked the occasion with a special Google Doodle. Cash transactions in Canada are now rounded to the nearest multiple of 5 cents, which is based on the total bill, with totals ending in 1 or 2 rounded down to 0, totals ending in 3, 4, 6, or 7 rounded to 5, and totals ending in 8 or 9 cents rounded up to 10. Now, let's briefly discuss double dies and machine doubling. Double dies occur during the die making process, which results in dramatic doubling on every coin struck from that die. This is due to the process of creating the coin die, which often involves multiple impressions from a working hub. If the hub or die shifts during this process, the finished die features 2 distinct impressions with separation between them, resulting in a doubled design, letters, or digits. There's also mechanical doubling, also known as strike, ejection, shelf, or shift doubling. This occurs when the die strikes a planchette and moves slightly or bounces during the striking process, which creates a flat shelf-like doubling effect. The effect is different on each of the coins struck and is considered a striking error rather than a variety. Understanding the differences and nuances between these types of doubling is important for coin collectors to accurately identify genuine varieties. Now, the 1999 Canadian penny error is a fascinating anomaly for Canadian coin collectors and enthusiasts alike. This error is characterized by machine doubling, specifically affecting the final 3 digits of 999 in the date of 1999 on the reverse of the coin. Now, to identify this error or anomaly, you need to closely examine the date of 1999 on the reverse side of the penny. Machine doubling, also known as strike doubling, typically occurs when the die strikes the planchette more than once due to die movement or misalignment during the striking process. In the case of this 1999 Canadian penny error, the doubling on the final 999 digits appears as a slightly shadowed or blurred effect. Unlike genuine double die errors, where the doubling is part of the die itself, machine doubling results in a flat appearance without clear separation between the original digits and the doubled ones. The occurrence of errors like this could stem from various factors during the minting process. One possibility is a die clash, where the obverse and reverse dies come into contact without a planchette between them. This collision causes the die to receive an unintended impression, leading to the doubling effect on subsequent strikes. On the other hand, it could be die wear or misalignment that could contribute towards the doubling that you can find on this coin. Understanding the potential causes of this error can shed some light on the complexity of the minting of coins and the challenges that are faced by minting facilities. Despite rigorous quality control measures, errors such as this can easily slip through production, making them highly sought after by collectors. In the numismatic market, the value of these error coins can vary based on several factors such as the severity of the error, the coin's condition, collector demand, and market trends. While low-grade examples of this error may not be worth too much above face value, pristine examples with pronounced doubling can fetch higher prices among collectors eager to add such a unique piece to their collection. It is super essential for you to carefully examine the penny from this year to identify its unique characteristics. While the most notable error is the doubling on the 999 date, variations in machine doubling or other minor errors may also be present. Each coin tells a story, and understanding the nuances of these errors enhances the appreciation of this amazing hobby. Now, before we get into the exact values for the 1999 Canadian penny with doubling on the final 3 digits, some of the details and specifications of any of these are off and may indicate that the coin is not authentic or legitimate. Now, the mintage figure for the 1999 Canadian penny, this is without a P mint mark. The only way that you can get the Canadian P mint mark penny is out of a proof set. Now, the mintage figure for the 1999 circulation penny is 1,089,625,000. So that is a massive mintage figure for a Canadian coin. Usually Canadian coins will have much lower mintage figures than their American counterparts, and when they do make so many of a coin, it makes your chances of being able to find errors and varieties a lot better. Now, this coin is composed of copper-plated zinc. It has a weight of 2.25 grams, a diameter of 19.05 millimeters. It has a thickness of 1.5 millimeters. The edge is plain. It has a die axis in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins. The obverse was designed and engraved by Dora de Pedri Hunt, and the reverse by G.E. Kruger Gray. Now, unfortunately, as I did mention before, this coin does not have a very high premium on the low end. If you find a beat up and worn example, it is not worth too much above face value, but it is still a pretty cool error to identify, and I would still hold on to them, honestly, because some people might want to have them just so they can have some cool errors in their collection. But as you start to get into the mint state range, it can be worth some decent money. Just to give you guys an idea, the highest price you can get for the 1999 Canadian penny without any errors or varieties is somewhere around $65 for an MS67. Now, if you can identify the doubling on the final 3 digits of the date, it can be worth up to $100. So it is worth almost twice as much as the regular variety, and the value will only go up as time goes on. Depending on the severity of the doubling, it could add a premium to the coin, and if it scored any higher than MS67, you could easily be talking a $200 to $500 piece. World of coin collecting has long maintained a special spot for nickels. They've existed in Canada's currency for more than a century. The journey actually began in the year 1858 when the province of Canada, which included Ontario and Quebec at the time, introduced the first nickel or 5-cent coin, commonly referred to as fish-scaled by those well-versed in Canadian numismatics. These tiny coins weighed 1.16 grams, measured 15.5 millimeters in diameter, and contained 92.5% silver. In the year 1922, Canada made the decision to make certain changes. One of the changes was to switch from using silver to nickel as the primary metal for their 5-cent coins. This decision was made due to the rising cost of silver and also the need for a more cost-effective alternative. Additionally, the size and weight of these coins were also adjusted during this time to better align with international standards and become almost identical in shape and size to the American 5-cent coins. By the year 1937, Canada had made the decision to redesign the nickel, and what better image to adorn its backside than the recognizable and iconic beaver. The diligent beaver has long been a representation of Canada's work ethic and was essential to the country's early growth. Except for a few special releases over the years, beginning with World War II, The beaver has proudly graced the reverse of our 5-cent currency since the year 1937. Canada's 100th birthday was commemorated in 1967 with the release of a commemorative 5-cent coin. It actually has the picture of a bunny on it, and due to this design, it has become a favorite among Canadian coin collectors. The Canadian Mint began making 5-cent coins composed of cupro nickel in the year 1982. Instead of 100% nickel, the coins would be composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This was in response to the escalating cost of precious metals on the worldwide market. Now, what do you say we get into the coin that you guys are all here to find out about, and that is the Canadian 1990 bearbelly nickel. Now, this coin is a fascinating numismatic rarity that has captured the interest of collectors and enthusiasts worldwide. This unique variety is known for a distinctive error that occurred during the production process, resulting in the removal of most or some of the fur from the underbelly of the beaver depicted on the reverse side of the coin. This error has led to the coin being affectionately referred to as the bearbelly variety, and it is highly sought after by collectors due to its rarity and also the intriguing story behind its creation. Now, to fully understand how the Canadian 1990 bearbelly nickel actually came into existence, it's essential to delve into the coin manufacturing process in Canada. The Canadian Mint, who's responsible for producing Canada's circulating coinage, employs a meticulous and multi-step approach to create coins with both precision and quality. The process begins with the design phase, where talented artists and engravers work together to craft the intricate and meaningful designs that will grace the nation's coins. In the case of the 1990 nickel, the design features the iconic image of the beaver, which is a symbol of Canada's rich natural heritage. Once the design is finalized, a master die is then created. This die serves as a template for producing numerous working dies, which will be used to strike the actual coins. These working dies are crucial to ensure consistent coin quality and detail. And then die polishing. Die polishing is a critical step in the coin minting process. It involves meticulously smoothing and refining the surface of the working die to ensure a high level of detail in the struck coins. This process is typically performed multiple times to maintain die quality. Now, here's where the unique era of the bearbelly variety comes into play. During the die polishing process for the 1990 nickel working dies, an unusual mistake occurred. Most of the fur on the underbelly of the beaver was inadvertently removed from the reverse side of the die. This error resulted in the beaver appearing to have a bare belly when the coins were struck using these specific dies. Now, what makes this error even more intriguing is that the die was polished several times, leading to different degrees of apparent baldness in the beaver's underbelly on the coins produced from these dies. So depending on the significance and the amount of detail that has been removed from the fur on the beaver's belly, the coin will be either referred to as a full bare belly or a partial bare belly, and this definitely affects the value. If you want to get the most amount of money, you are looking for the full bare belly variation. Now, before we get into the value of this coin, let's go over some of the specifications. It is composed of 75% copper, 25% nickel. It has a weight of 4.6 grams, a diameter of 21.2 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.76 millimeters. The designers and engravers for the obverse of the coin were Dorota Padre Hunt and Ago Aran, and for the reverse of the coin, G.E. Kruger Gray and Thomas Shingles. The edge of the coin is smooth, it is non-magnetic, and it is in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. Now, when it comes to value, this is actually a modern nickel that does hold some premium, even on the low end of the Sheldon scale. Now, if you did find one of these and it's in a G4, which is beat up and put through the meat grinder, basically a parking lot coin that has almost no detail, then it is not worth much above face value. You might be able to get 50 cents to $1 for it if somebody really wants it for their collection. But the price estimates actually start to kick in at the EF40 mark, where it is evaluated at $5 for an EF40 example, which isn't too bad for a modern nickel. It is honestly one of the most valuable and rare of the modern Canadian nickels to look for. And based on previous trends, in 10 or 20 years, the value will only keep increasing and less of these will be out in circulation. So the value of the coin will definitely go up. Now, as you start to get into the MS scale, you see some decent price jumps. It can be worth around $25 for an MS60, around $55 for an MS63, and all the way up to $378 for an MS65, which is currently the highest listed price example on coins in Canada. If you were to find one and it's scored in the MS66 or 67 range, there isn't any reason that you might not be able to get $500 to $1,000 for this coin, especially if it has the full bare belly designation as well. Now, if you were to send one of these to PCGS, they do actually attribute the bearbelly variation. So if you do find one and it is in really good shape, definitely advisable that you send it off to be graded by PCGS. And if it scores in an MS 66 or 67, you have yourself one incredibly rare Canadian heir or variety coin. The Canadian penny was officially released in the year 1858. Those were referred to as large cents or large pennies, and those remained into effect until the year 1920 when the size changed. The composition has changed many times over the years, with some of the early Canadian pennies being minted out of bronze or brass, and then eventually out of pure copper, and now out of steel plated with copper on the outside. The diameter of the penny has also changed over time, with 19.05 millimeters being the most current and well-known measurement, very similar to the American small cent. Even though the Canadian penny is no longer manufactured for circulation after the year 2012, it is still produced for collector sets, such as the specimen and proof sets released by the Canadian Mint. These collections frequently feature limited edition pennies to mark important occasions or anniversaries. Even though they aren't as widely available as they previously may have been, you can still discover pennies if you look long and hard enough. Despite its discontinuation, it still remains a highly collected item. Some of the places that you can get pennies here in Canada are from your bank by asking for a $25 box or some loose rolls, and first of all hoping that they have any, and secondly are ready to break procedure in order to give them to you. Unfortunately, every financial institution in Canada is obligated to return any pennies that have been returned to be melted down. Despite this, and also the existence of businesses like Brinks and Garterworld, which also operate their own alloy recycling programs, you still may be able to find some pennies out in the wild today. Aside from financial institutions, you could always take a gander on Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, and you can also check out your local neighborhood coin shop to see if they have any bulk pennies that you can purchase. Now that we've given you guys some information on the Canadian penny, what do you say we get into these 1962 penny errors and variations, because there are a whole lot that we have to cover here, and they can all be worth some really good money if you can identify any of them. So as I mentioned earlier, there are upwards of 10 different errors or variations you can look for when it comes to your Canadian 1962 pennies. The first are the hanging varieties, the most common of which is the single hanging 2. If you look above the digit of 2 on the reverse of the coin, there should be a little line that connects from the top of the 2, curving upwards and then horizontally to the left until it touches the maple leaf. This is the result of a die clash, and depending on how late into production the dies were used with this error, the more significant it can become. There are also double and even triple hanging 2s, and the more of these die clashes or lines you can count, the more valuable this variety becomes. Then there's the missing M variety. Usually Canadian pennies will have the initial of MG at the bottom of the portrait of Queen Elizabeth on the obverse. In 1962, whether due to die deterioration or other technical difficulties, the M in the initial is actually not visible. This variety can also be compounded with the hanging varieties to make it a double error and increase the value substantially. There can also be doubling on the final 3 digits of the date in 1962, and depending on how many of the digits are doubled and also the significance of the doubling, it can be quite valuable. The last 2 notable variations for the 1962 Canadian pennies are also by far the most cool, and those are the guitar and harp variations. As a guitar player my whole life, this is a penny that has been on my radar for a long time, and I still have not been blessed by one of these by the coin gods, but I know other coin roll hunters who have found them, so they are out there. To identify and differentiate between the harp and guitar strings, you have to look underneath the 1 in the 1 cent on the top of the reverse of the coin, and if there are lines running vertically from the 1 to the top of the maple leaf, then you have one of these 2 very rare coins. The harp lines or strings would appear wider and more spread apart and may not be running all the way down and making contact with the maple leaf. The guitar lines or strings would be more narrow and more pronounced and would run clearly, making contact with the maple leaf. The guitar is the rarer and more valuable of the 2 varieties, so that is the one that you want to look for, but finding either one of these would definitely be a nice little treat. Now that we've discussed how to identify some of these varieties, what do you say we get into the values for these pennies? First, we will discuss the 1962 single hanging 2. One thing I do want to point out as well is most of these pennies aren't worth too much on the low end. They aren't worth too much more than face value. You might be able to get a couple dollars for them if somebody really wants them or they're trying to fill a hole in their collection. But usually to get the most amount of money from the coins that I'm mentioning, you want them to be in a high grade state. So that means MS60 to MS67. So to identify the single hanging 2 1962, you want to look for the hook that connects from the top of the 2 to the bottom of the maple leaf. If you can identify that, it can be worth around $9 for an MS60 to an MS62 example. This one can be worth around $300 for an MS66, and it could easily be worth up to $500 to $750 if you were to find one and it scored an MS67, which is extremely hard for Canadian coins. It's very rare that Canadian coins score MS66 or MS67, but never say never. If you're able to find an uncirculated roll of these, there's no reason they may be able to score a high grade like the MS66 or MS67 territory. Then there's the 1962 double hanging 2. Now to identify this one, it'll be very similar to the single hanging 2, but you want to look for multiple lines. There should be at least 2 of them. And in terms of value, it can be worth around $800 for an MS67 example. So it is just slightly more valuable and rare than the single hanging 2 variety. And then there is the triple hanging 2. Now this one is much more rare than the single or double hanging 2 varieties. It's worth around $38 if you find one in an MS60 or MS62, but you see some massive price jumps with this coin. If you were to find one and it scored anywhere near an MS66 or MS67, it could easily be worth thousands of dollars. If it scored in the MS67 territory, you could easily be talking a $3,000 coin. This is a pretty significant error for it to have 3 die clashes and get the triple hanging designation. So definitely the hanging 2s are good varieties to look for. Then there's the 1962 missing M variety. To identify this one, you want to look at the bottom of the portrait of Queen Elizabeth. And in most cases, when you check for this heir, you're going to see the initials MG. But if you ever check and that M is missing, you have one rare 1962 penny that can be worth $377 for an MS66 example. And this coin could see a significant price jump as well. It could easily be worth up to $750 if it did score in the MS67 range. Now, even more rare and valuable than the missing M variety is the 1962 missing M with a hanging 2. Now, this would be known as a double error because it contains 2 significant errors. So to identify this, it needs to have the die clash, giving it the hanging 2, and it will also have the missing M for the initials MG. If you can identify both of these, it can be worth around $205 for an MS65, but it could be worth all the way up to $2,500 for an MS67 if you were to find one and it graded that high. It would seem that they were having a lot of problems with their dies in the year 1962, and your chances of being able to find some of these pennies, even with a double error, are not the worst ever. So keep your eyes out for a missing M and a hanging 2 on your 1962 pennies. Then there are the 1962s that can contain doubling on the final 3 digits. Now, if it has a double 2, it can be worth around $50 for an MS65. If it has a doubled 9, 6, and 2, so the final 3 digits all contain machine doubling or die deterioration, then it adds a pretty significant premium. It can be worth around $100 for an MS65, so the price actually jumps to 2 times the value if it only has doubling on the single digit. And it could easily see some massive price jumps and be worth up to $500 to $1,000 if it's scored in the MS67 range. And then last but not least, we have the 2 string varieties of the 1962 pennies, and those are the harp and guitar string varieties. Now, first is the harp variety. To identify this, you want to look below the 1 on 1 cent on the reverse of the coin, and there should be lines running vertically from the bottom of the 1 to the top of the maple leaf. The strings on the harp will look wider and less pronounced. This one can be worth around $380 for an MS66 example, but if you were to find one and it scored any higher, it could be worth up to $1,000 for an MS67. Now, the 1962 guitar variety is the rarer of the 2 string varieties for the 1962 pennies. It's worth around $100 for an MS64 example, so it's probably worth around $300 for an MS65. Currently, MS64 is the highest graded known example. So if you were able to find one of the 1962 guitar pennies and it graded any higher than MS64, then you would have one very, very rare coin that could easily be worth up to $1,500 For an MS-67, to identify this, you want to look under the 1 on 1 cent on the reverse of the coin, and it should have lines running vertically connecting to the top of the maple leaf. The lines should be more narrow and more pronounced on the guitar variety. The Canadian $2 coin, also commonly referred to as the Toonie, has been a key part of Canada's currency and economy since its introduction on February 19, 1996. This bimetallic coin was launched by the Minister of Public Works Diane Marleau, replacing the Canadian $2 banknote. Unlike its paper predecessor, the Toonie boasted a significantly longer lifespan, estimated at 20 years, thanks to its patented bimetallic locking mechanism. The Toonie is engineered and composed of an aluminum bronze core encased in a pure nickel and later multiply plated steel outer ring. The reverse side of the coin typically features a striking image of a polar bear, which was designed by artist Brent Townsend, while the obverse of the Canadian Toonie, which was updated in 2023 after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, now bears the portrait of King Charles III, with the inscription Charles III DG Rex. This innovative coin was engineered and produced at the Royal Canadian Mint's Winnipeg facility in Manitoba, Canada. By the end of the year 1996, approximately 375 million Toonies had been minted, with some of the initial planchettes being sourced from a German company by the name of Deutsche Nickel to help with the overwhelming demand. Unlike the loonie or Canadian $1 coin, which coexisted with the Canadian $1 bill for some time, the $2 bill was withdrawn from circulation just 3 days before the Toonie's debut, marking a swift transition and drastic change in the way that Canadians would do cash transactions. The name Toonie itself is a clever blend of the words two and loonie. Though other names were proposed, the Toonie became the widely used and generally accepted term. The Canadian Mint officially secured the rights to the name in the year 2006. To celebrate its impact, the town of Campbellford, Ontario, which is home to the coin's designer, erected a massive 8-meter tall Toonie monument, one of the many giant coins that can be found scattered around the province of Ontario. In the year 2002, Canada celebrated the Golden Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II, marking 50 years since her ascension to the throne on February 6, 1952. This milestone was commemorated with special coinage, including unique designs featuring the Queen's portrait with the dual dates of 1952 to 2002 beneath the bust of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse of all of the different Canadian coin denominations. However, among these commemorative Toonies, a rare and valuable heir emerged that is known as the 2002 dot and H Toonie. This heir is distinguished by a small raised dot located in between the two downward strokes and the letter H on the wording for Elizabeth on the obverse of the coin. Unlike the standard 2002 Jubilee Toonie, which lacks this marking, this dot is an unintentional feature, likely caused by a die defect. Such defects usually occur when a foreign particle or debris gets struck into the die during the minting process, causing repeated impressions of the anomaly on subsequent coins. It's also possible that prolonged wear on the die could have led to the formation of the raised dot over time. Regardless of how this error came into existence, I can assure you that the dot, however prominent, is not intentional. There are examples of coins with dots put there to intentionally distinguish them from other coins minted with the same date and design, whether they be trials, patterns, tests, specimens, or special issues, but in a lot of cases, like this one, the dot is caused by an anomaly or error in the minting process, as opposed to being put there on purpose. Now here is how you can identify if you have the 2002 dot and H Toonie. First, you want to flip over to the obverse side of the coin. You also want to make sure that it is the 2002 Golden Jubilee Toonie. So on the obverse underneath Queen Elizabeth's bust, it will have the dual date of 1952 to 2002 beneath her portrait. Then you want to look at the word Elizabeth on the obverse of the coin. Take a look at the letter H in the wording for Elizabeth at the top of the coin. Then look between the two downward strokes beneath the center line in the H for a small raised dot. You can zoom in with your phone's camera or use a digital microscope to get a closer look, and also proper lighting will help make the dot more visible. You can also compare it with a regular issue 2002 Toonie. If you have another 2002 Golden Jubilee Toonie without the dot, place them side by side and the difference should become much more clear, and you will be able to tell if one of them is definitely the dot or not. The rarity of this error makes it highly desirable among collectors. Even in extremely fine or EF40 condition, which indicates some wear and circulation marks on the coin, the 2002 dot Toonie has an appraised value of $237. This means that coins in better condition, especially those in mint state, could fetch significantly higher prices. If uncirculated high-grade examples were to surface, it could easily command impressive premiums in the numismatic market. Coin errors like the 2002 dot Toonie add an extra layer of intrigue to the hobby. They provide insight into the minting process and highlight how even minor imperfections can turn an ordinary coin into a valuable rarity. As one of the more elusive and valuable Toonie errors, the 2002 dot and H Toonie remains a fascinating piece of modern Canadian numismatic history. Now, before we get into the high-end values so you can find out approximately how much you could get for this coin if you find one, let's go over some of the details and specifications. If any of these are off, it may indicate that the coin is not legitimate, which may seem like overkill, but you would be shocked at the amount of counterfeit Toonies that have floated around in the last 5 years or so, and unfortunately the 2002 is one of the dates that has been counterfeited. If you would like a comprehensive guide on how to identify Canadian counterfeit Toonies, I definitely suggest you go check out my video where I show some examples. Now, the overall mintage for the 2002 Golden Jubilee Toonie is 27,008,000. The 2002 dot and H is included in that mintage figure. The coin is composed of an outer ring of 100% nickel and a core composed of 92% copper, 6% aluminum, and 2% nickel. It has a weight of 7.3 grams, a diameter of 28 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.8 millimeters. The obverse was designed and engraved by Dora DePadre Hunt and the reverse by Brent Townsend and Ago Aran. The edge of the coin is serrated and it has a diaxis and metal alignment, which is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins. Now, I'm actually going to give you guys the secret trick that I use for determining the approximate or potential value of a coin that doesn't have a lot of price listings. Currently on coins in Canada, the only listed value for this error that I could find is $237 for an EF40 example, which is a slightly worn or beat up coin. So first I will give you my high grade example estimates, and then I will show you the basic but effective system that I use to get these values. So the confirmed value that we have currently is $237 for an EF40. So I would estimate that it would be worth around $400 plus for an AU50, probably around $750 to $1,000 for an MS60. You could be seeing prices as high as $2,000 for an MS63, and you could easily be talking a $3,000 coin or more if you did find one of these and is scored in the MS65 range. If you are able to find an uncirculated roll of Canadian 2002 Toonies, whether it be from the bank or maybe you buy an uncirculated roll from a coin shop, if you bust it open and find a few of these dot and H Toonies, you can make some big money if they score in the high MS range. Usually coins are struck and rolled sequentially, so if you did open up a roll, chances are you would probably find a few of these errors if they are in there. Now you may be wondering, how do I come up with these estimates if they only give a confirmed value of $237 for an EF40? Where do I come up with the price of $3,000 for an MS65? Well, it is pretty simple. It is based off of the regular issue 2002 Toonie's price growth. If you look at the regular 2002 Toonie on coins in Canada, it is appraised at $29.70 for a VF20. And then for an EF40, it is appraised at $72.20. So that is a price increase of 2.43 times in value. So if you round up and you apply a similar 2.5 to 3 times multiplier to the 2002 Toonie's EF40 value of $237, we can estimate an AU50 value of around 400 and an MS60 value of around 750 to 1000. Now these are just my estimates, of course, they are not just exact values. The only confirmed value that we do have is $237, but if you do use this system, you will find that it's pretty effective most of the time. Now all of that being said, the 2002 .H Toonie is an incredibly rare and valuable air coin, with even slightly worn EF40 examples fetching around $237. However, if you were to find one in mint state condition, its value could skyrocket into the thousands. Given the rarity of this air, a high-grade MS65 or better could easily command $3,000 or more, possibly much higher if demand continues to grow. Air coins like this are always sought after by collectors, and history has shown the rare Canadian Toonie varieties can fetch impressive sums. If a mint state example of this coin does surface, there's no telling how high the bidding could go. It could easily potentially reach the $5,000 to $10,000 mark, or even higher if it's in top condition. So if you ever come across a 2002 Golden Jubilee Toonie, be sure to check the H in Elizabeth for that tiny but crucial dot. A quick zoom in with your phone or a digital microscope could be the difference between pocket change and a life-changing find. Who knows, you might just be holding onto one of the rarest and most valuable Canadian Toonies ever discovered. The 1967 Canadian Rabbit Nickel is a fascinating coin for collectors, especially due to the rare rotated die air, which can be found with rotations of either 90 or 180 degrees. This particular air is most commonly discovered in Canadian proof sets from the year 1967, but it is also possible to find it on regular issue business strike coins. However, it's super important to note that the most recognized and highly valued versions of the 1967 Rabbit Nickels with rotated die airs originate from proof sets. Now, to understand the nuances between different types of coin strikes, it's essential to distinguish between proof-like, which is known as PL, brilliant uncirculated, which is known as NBU, and business strike coins, which are known as mint state or MS. Proof-like or PL coins are not intended for circulation. They are struck and sold by the Canadian Mint in special packaging. Despite usually having the same composition as coins produced for circulation, PL coins are set apart by their superior finish, which includes a mirror-like surface and sharp details due to their high-quality strike. The packaging is a key element here because it helps preserve their pristine condition. If these PL coins are removed from their protective envelope or case, it becomes more challenging to differentiate them from uncirculated or business strike coins. The most valuable 1967 Rabbit Nickels with rotated die airs are usually found from the Canadian PL sets from the year 1967. Now there are also brilliant uncirculated coins, which are classified as NBU. These coins share some similarities with PL coins. They are also not intended for circulation and are struck and sold by the mint in special packaging. The term NBU started being used by third-party grading companies and other references beginning in the year 1977, essentially replacing the term proof-like. NBU coins are characterized by their pristine condition. Similar to proof-like coins, if NBU classified coins are removed from their original packaging, it can be extremely hard to distinguish them from regular circulation issues. While the NBU designation came after the year 1967, understanding this terminology will help you understand the types of high-quality strikes that you can look for when it comes to collecting or coin roll hunting. Now, business strike coins are the standard coins produced for everyday use and circulation. These coins are typically minted in large quantities, distributed to the general public, and it is intended to be used as currency for everyday transactions. The condition, finish, and quality of business strike coins will typically not be as high as PL or even NBU coins because they are meant to withstand the rigors of daily handling and circulation. Now, although it is not considered as valuable or rare as the proof-like version, this rotated die air can also appear on regular business strike issues on 1967 Canadian rabbit nickels. However, these examples typically do not command as high a value as those from the proof sets due to their lesser finish and the higher likelihood of wear and tear. The 1967 Canadian rabbit nickels are a significant piece of Canadian numismatic history, both for their commemorative value and also for the rare rotated die errors that make certain specimens highly sought after by collectors. This coin was issued to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Confederation of Canada, a landmark event that prompted the Canadian government to commission special designs for the Canadian coin denominations from the penny through to the silver dollar for that year. A few years prior, in 1964, the Canadian Minister of Finance, Walter L. Gordon, announced a competition inviting artists, sculptors, and designers residing in Canada or Canadians living abroad to submit special designs for the new centennial coinage. The competition offered a $2,500 first prize for the winning designs in each of the different 6 coinage denominations. A distinguished panel of judges was appointed to select the winning designs. The winning designs were chosen from submissions received by the competition's closing date on March 31st, 1965, and the winners were announced in the Mint Report of 1966. Alex Colville of Sackville, New Brunswick was selected for all reverses of the 1967 centennial coinage, and Arnold Mockin designed the obverses featuring Queen Elizabeth II. The 1967 5-cent coin, affectionately known as the rabbit nickel, features a design by Alex Colville of a hopping rabbit, symbolizing wildlife of Canada and capturing the spirit of centennial celebrations. Unlike the dimes, quarters, half dollars, and silver dollars, which were struck in silver with some in 50% and some in 80%, and only 80% for the half dollars and silver dollars, the rabbit nickels were composed of the usual composition of 99.9% nickel. A particularly intriguing aspect of the 1967 rabbit nickel is the occurrence of these rotated die errors. This error results when the obverse and reverse dies are misaligned when the coins are being struck, leading to the images on the 2 sides of the coin not being correctly oriented. The 2 most notable degrees of rotation are 90 degrees and 180 degrees. Now, the errors on the 1967 Canadian rabbit nickels are most commonly found in proof sets from 1967, which were specially minted for collectors with higher quality strikes and finishes. To identify a 90-degree rotation, hold the coin with the obverse or the Queen's portrait facing upright. If you then rotate or spin the coin around and the rabbit design appears to be on a 90-degree angle rather than upright, then you have the 90-degree rotated die error. This means that the rabbit design will be oriented horizontally either to the left or right. To identify the 180-degree error, the rabbit design will be upside down when the obverse or the queen is upright. This means that the rabbit will be directly inverted in comparison to the obverse side of the coin. One of the easiest ways I can suggest to identify this misaligned or rotated die error is to actually put your rabbit nickel into a cardboard coin flip. And then if you flip over to the obverse side and make sure that the queen is facing up, and then you flip over to the rabbit side and it is not oriented in the same direction, then you have yourself the rotated die. That's usually how I check them. Your best chance of being able to find one of these 1967 rotated die PL rabbit nickels is out of a Canadian proof-like set from the year 1967, but that doesn't mean that you can't ever find one in the wild. But if these coins are removed from their original protective packaging, it will be much more difficult and challenging to distinguish them from a regular uncirculated business strike. The rotated die error found on the PL version of these coins is particularly valuable due to the limited number produced and their enhanced quality. While the rotated die error is most recognized and valuable in proof sets, it can also occur in regular issue business strike coins, which were minted for everyday circulation. Business strike coins will typically have a less refined finish compared to PL coins due to the higher speed and larger quantities in which they are produced. Although finding a rotated die error on a business strike version of one of these 1967 rabbit nickels is not as valuable as one from the proof set, it still adds a premium to the coin due to the novelty and rarity of the error. These coins, whether found in proof sets or in your pocket change, represent a fascinating intersection of artistry, history, and the meticulous process of coin minting. Collectors highly prize these coins not only for their unique airs, but also for their place in commemorating Canada's centennial, marking an era of national pride and cultural celebration. The combination of Alex Colville's iconic rabbit design and the potential for discovering a rare rotated die air makes these 1967 rabbit nickels a compelling addition to any coin collection. Before we get into the values for the different versions of the 1967 rotated die rabbit nickel, some of the details and specifications of any of these are off and may indicate that it is not a legitimate example. The overall mintage for the 1967 Canadian rabbit nickel is 36,876,574. It is composed of pure nickel. It has a weight of 4.54 grams. It has a current melt value of 12 cents, a diameter of 21.21 millimeters. The standard die axis for 1967 nickels will be in metal alignment, which is the standard for Canadian, British, and Australian coins, but if it has a rotated die air, it may appear more like an American coin, or either the queen or the rabbit will not be oriented in the same direction. Now, the obverse of this coin was designed by Arnold Mockin and the reverse by Alex Colville. Now, what do you say we get into some of the values for the 1967 Canadian rotated die rabbit nickels? I'm going to be giving you guys the values for the PL versions of this coin, which is the proof-like. Now, just to give you guys an idea, if you pull one of these 1967 rabbit nickels out of a proof-like set and it doesn't have the rotated die air, it can only be worth around $1.50 for a PL63, and it has a maximum value currently of around $35. So not super valuable even on the high end. Now, if you're able to identify the 180-degree rotated die air, which will mean that the rabbit and queen are oriented in the opposite direction of each other, it can be worth around $1,000 for a PL64, and it has a current maximum evaluated price of around $1,900 for a PL66. If it graded any higher, you could easily see a $2,500 nickel. And that is for the 180-degree rotated die air. And then last but not least, we have the 90-degree rotated die air. Now, to identify this one, if you flip over to the obverse and the queen is facing upright, and then you spin over to the reverse, and then the rabbit is facing to the side, then you have yourself the 90-degree rotated die air. Now, there's currently only one evaluated price for this coin, and it is around $1,000 for a PL64, not quite as valuable as the 180-degree air, but if you are able to find either of these and they have the 90 or 180 degree, they are extremely rare and valuable. In most cases, if you do find a rotated die on a business strike version of the 1967 Canadian nickel, it won't be quite as significant as a 90 or 180 degree rotation. It will only be slightly off axis, but if you are able to identify a 90 or 180 degree rotation off of a coin you find in your pocket change, I definitely suggest sending it in, because it may have even been pulled out of a proof-like set at some point. So before we do get into the value and specifications for the 1991 quarter, I thought I would go over some of the story of how a coin with such a limited mintage can actually come into existence. Coin mintage refers to the quantity of a specific coin design produced by a mint during a particular year or time period. It is a fundamental aspect of a coin's history and production. The rarity of coins is usually measured on how scarce or uncommon they are in relativity to its total mintage. Coins with lower mintages are generally considered more rare because there are fewer of them available to collectors or the public. Several factors contribute to the rarity of a coin, including mintage numbers. Coins with low mintage numbers are inherently rare. When fewer coins are minted, there are fewer available to collectors to acquire. Survival rate. The number of coins that have survived over time also affects rarity. Coins that were well preserved or saved by collectors are more likely to be available today. Melting and withdrawal. Changes in composition or economic factors like the alloy recycling program can lead to the withdrawal and melting of coins. This reduces the number of surviving specimens and increases the rarity of some dates. Coins that have garnered significant collector interest tend to be less common in the market due to collectors acquiring and holding on to them. Rarity is a critical factor in determining the value of a coin. Generally, rarer coins command higher prices in the numismatic market. Collectors and investors are often willing to pay a premium for coins that are difficult to obtain due to their limited availability. The condition or grade of a rare coin can also significantly impact its value. Coins in excellent condition are more desirable to collectors and can fetch higher prices. Usually coins with low mintage figures will also hold some historical significance. They may mark a special period, event, or a change in coinage history. This historical context adds to their appeal and value. Numismatists value coins that provide insights into the past, and low mintage coins often do just that. Collector preferences can drive demand for specific coins. Coins that are part of a series or set have unique designs or represent specific milestones and are highly sought after. Collector demand can create competition and influence prices, particularly for rare and desirable coins. Market trends, including auction results and changing collector tastes, can impact the value of coins. Prices for some key dates may fluctuate based on market dynamics and also demand from buyers. Another major factor that could have led to the creation of the Canadian 1991 quarter is labor disputes and strikes. Labor disputes, strikes, or work stoppages at a mint can disrupt normal coin production operations. Mint employees, including coin press operators, engravers, and other key personnel, may participate in strikes to demand better working conditions, higher wages, or other labor-related issues. Strikes often lead to production delays, as mint facilities may operate at reduced capacity or cease production altogether during this strike period. This can result in a backlog of coins that need to be minted once the strike is resolved. A strike can directly impact the mintage numbers for a given year or denomination. If the work strike occurs during the planned production window for a particular coin, the mint might not actually be able to produce as many coins were as originally intended. This can lead to a lower mintage for the affected coin. Strikes may also affect the quality of coins produced during and immediately following the strike period. Mint employees returning to work after a strike may need some time to ensure that the coin presses and equipment are operating smoothly, potentially impacting the quality of the struck coins. In the case of the 1991 Canadian quarter, if there was indeed a strike at the Canadian Mint during that year, it could have contributed to the lower mintage of quarters for that specific date. The disruption in production and potential quality control issues may have led to a scarcity of well-struck, uncirculated specimens, further enhancing the coin's rarity and desirability. Now, some of the reasons that the 1991 Canadian quarters are considered so rare compared to their counterparts in the similar date ranges. In 1991, the Canadian Mint produced a significantly lower number of these quarters compared to other years. This limited mintage is a key factor in the coin's rarity. The exact reasons for this low mintage are not always publicly disclosed by mints, but there are a few potential explanations. Economic factors. Economic conditions can influence a mint's decision to reduce coin production. In times of economic uncertainty or budget constraints, mints may reduce the production of certain denominations, including quarters, to save on costs. So, foreseeing the production of the 1992 provincial series, they may have actually reduced the size of the production run for 1991 quarters. I don't think they intended to reduce it that small, but that would definitely be a good reason right there. Supply and demand. If there was a surplus of quarters from previous years in circulation and a reduced demand for new quarters, the mint may have decided to produce fewer coins to avoid an oversupply. While the reverse design of the 1991 quarter was not unique or commemorative, it's possible that the Canadian Mint still opted for a lower mintage that year based on their production plans and priorities. Over time, the low mintage of the 1991 quarter gained the attention of coin collectors and numismatists worldwide. The combination of a low mintage figure and the regular design led to increased demand among collectors, further driving up its rarity and value in the secondary market. Many of the 1991 quarters that were minted entered circulation where they endured wear and tear. As a result, finding well-preserved uncirculated specimens from that year became increasingly challenging, contributing to their rarity. So what do you say we go over some of the specifications and give you guys the potential values if you did ever discover one of these in your pocket change or coin roll hunting? So the Canadian 1991 quarter has a mintage figure of 459,000. It is composed of 100% nickel. It has a weight of 5.05 grams, a diameter of 23.88 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.58 millimeters. The coin was designed and engraved by Dorda Pedri Hunt and Ago Aran for the obverse and Emmanuel Hahn for the reverse. The edge is rated, it is magnetic, and it comes in metal alignment as is the standard for most Canadian coins. Now, one of the greatest things about this 1991 quarter is that it is a coin that retains a premium even on the low end. If you find one of these and it's all beat up and been put through the meat grinder and it's at the very bottom of the Sheldon grading scale, you can still get some decent money for it, around $5 to $10, which is a decent profit considering that you only invested 25 cents to find the coin. But when you start to get into the MS region, you start to see some pretty big price jumps. It can be worth around $10 for an MS60, around $20 for an MS64, and all the way up to $120 for an MS66. And this is a coin that's value is only going to go up over time. It doesn't just have one of the lowest mintage figures of any Canadian coin in the last 50 years, but any coin produced in North America, probably within the last 150 years. This is an incredibly rare coin, but it is one that is fairly modern and they are still floating out there. I've known several Canadian coin roll hunters that have found even a few of these in their coin roll hunts, and I know that you can find them in your pocket change too, so it is definitely a good one to keep your eyes out for, and I only see the value going up on these bad boys as time goes on. The $2 coin, commonly referred to as the Toonie, was introduced in Canada in the year 1996 to replace the $2 banknote. It features a bimetallic design with an outer ring made of multiply plated steel and an inner core composed of aluminum bronze. In the year 2010, the Canadian Mint produced two varieties for the Toonie with differing numbers of serrations along the outside rim. The more common version of this coin has 16 serrations, while the rarer of the two varieties only has 14 serrations. These serrations serve both aesthetic and functional purposes, aiding in the coin's anti-counterfeiting measures and providing a tactile texture for easy identification. The rarer variety of the 2010 Toonies only has 14 serrations along the outer rim. This difference in the serration counts sets it apart from the more common version and makes it more highly sought after by collectors. Now, to differentiate the 14 serration variety from the more common 16 serration version, you just need to inspect the outer rim of the coin. Counting the serrations along the rim can help identify which of the two 2010 Toonie varieties that you possess. Due to its rarity, the 14 serration variety of these 2010 Toonies holds greater collectible value compared to the more common 16 serration version. The discovery of such minor variations in coin designs often sparks excitement among collectors and numismatists. These unique varieties contribute to the diversity and richness of the hobby, encouraging further exploration and study of Canadian coinage. The Canadian 2010 Toonie, with its two serration varieties, is a prime example of the intricacies and nuances found within the world of numismatics. The quest to uncover and find rare varieties like the 14 serration Toonie adds a layer of depth and excitement to the pursuit of collecting Canadian coins, and also gives you another reason to coin roll hunt Toonies here in Canada. Now, in the year 2010, an intriguing Toonie was discovered in a set celebrating the Vancouver Olympic Games known as the No Waterlines variety. This unique variation is found exclusively within the 2010 Olympic coin sets, and it offers collectors a distinctive twist on the traditional design. To identify this variety, you simply need to scrutinize the background behind the polar bear featured on the coin's reverse in the center core. Unlike the regular issue, the No Waterlines variety exhibits a smoother appearance with fewer details and lines in the water, creating a visually captivating contrast. The existence of this 2010 No Waterlines variety on this Canadian Toonie may be attributed to several factors in the minting process. One plausible explanation could involve dye preparation and maintenance. Dye polishing, a routine step in the dye preparation process, involves smoothing out imperfections and irregularities on the dye's surface to ensure clear and precise strikes on the coins. During dye polishing, if the background behind the polar bear on the center core of the dye was not uniformly treated, it could result in variations in the level of detail and lines present in the design. This inconsistency could lead to the creation of the No Waterlines variety, where the background exhibits fewer details and lines compared to the standard version. Other factors such as dye wear or differences in striking pressure could also contribute to these variations or the appearance of the coin's design elements. Over time, dyes undergo wear and tear from the repeated striking of coins, which can affect the clarity and definition of the design. Variations in striking pressure during the minting process can also result in differences in the depth and intensity of the design elements on the coin. While the exact cause of the no waterlines variety may not be definitively known, it is likely the result of subtle differences in the dye preparation or striking process. Despite the rarity of this variety and its presence primarily in the 2010 Olympic coin sets, it serves as a fascinating example of the intricacies and nuances involved in the minting of Canadian coins. Now, what sets the no waterlines variety apart from the other 2010 Toonies is not just its scarcity, but also its potential for increased value when combined with other rare features. For instance, if paired with the 14 serration variety, the value of this coin can escalate significantly, potentially reaching or exceeding $1,000. Now, most or all of the Toonies made for these sets were intended to come with these 16 serrations, so finding one with 14 serrations and no waterlines could make it a one-of-a-kind air coin. Now, we do have some price estimates for the no waterlines variety, which are as followed. This coin is classified as NBU, meaning it has a brilliant uncirculated finish and comes out of a set, but it would not look any different than your standard 2010 Toonie unless it has the no waterlines air. So just to give you guys an idea, if you find the regular 2010 Toonie out of this set and it doesn't have any airs and it has the 16 serrations, which is the standard, then it can be worth up to $35 for an NBU 67, which isn't quite at the tip top of the Sheldon scale, but it is a really high grade example of one of these coins. Now, if you can identify the no waterlines variety, which will mean that there will be less detail in the water ripples on the center core reverse design of the coin, then it can be worth around $200 for an NBU 67. So the price increases quite a bit from the standard issue, and if you were to find one and it scored any higher than that, you could be sure that you would see some big price jumps. You could easily be talking a $1,000 coin or more if it hits that NBU 70 mark. So let's also discuss the value for the regular circulation 2010 Toonies. If you were to find the 2010 Business Strike, it would be classified as an MS. The value of the 16 serration version, which is the more common issue, can be worth up to $51 for an MS66 example, which is an exceptionally high grade for a business strike. If you were to find the rare of the two varieties, which is the 14 serration version of the 2010 Toonie, it can be worth up to $350 for an MS66 example. So it is actually quite valuable and one of the more rare of the Canadian Toonies that you can look for. And as I mentioned earlier, if you were able to find one of the 2010 Olympic sets and identify both the 14 serrations and also the no waterline variety on the 2010 Toonie out of the set, you could be talking a one-of-a-kind holy grail coin, as all the 2010 Toonies and the Olympic sets were intended to be struck with 16 serrations. So if you ever are able to find the no waterline variety, you also want to check and see if maybe, just maybe, it has the 14 serrations as well. The allure of discovering rare varieties like the 2010 No Waterlines Toonie extends beyond the realm of mere coin collecting. Each new variety discovered adds a layer of depth and excitement to the hobby and prompts collectors to delve deep into their collections to see if they possess any of these unique pieces. The possibility of finding one of these rare coins in circulation or in your pocket change adds an element of fun and surprise to the pursuit and encourages enthusiasts to keep a keen eye on their pocket change for hidden treasures. In the world of coin collecting, every discovery holds the potential to unveil a hidden gem, and the no waterlines variety exemplifies this sentiment perfectly. As collectors embark on their quest to acquire these elusive coins, they contribute to the broader appreciation and understanding of Canadian numismatic history. With each new, unique variety that surfaces, it gives us another chance to own a tangible piece of Canadian numismatic history. In 1942, the Royal Canadian Mint introduced a unique 12-sided design for the nickel as a strategic response to a specific concern related to the coin's appearance. During this period, Canadian nickels were primarily composed of tombac, an alloy of copper and nickel. However, the tombac's bronze color closely resembled that of Canadian pennies, which were also predominantly copper. To avoid confusion and facilitate easy differentiation between the nickel and the penny, the Canadian Mint decided to change the nickel's shape to a distinctive dodecagonal or 12-sided form. This innovative design served as a practical purpose, allowing people to quickly and visually distinguish between the 12-sided nickel and the round penny, even if they shared a similar color. During World War II and the Korean War, the Canadian Mint faced the challenge of metal shortages due to demands of wartime industries. To conserve precious metals for critical war efforts, the composition of Canadian nickels underwent significant changes. This started in the early 1940s with the introduction of the tomback nickels, and that eventually evolved in the late World War II years to steel coated with nickel with an additional chrome plating layer measuring 0.127 millimeters and 0.0003 millimeters. The introduction of the steel-based coins was a strategic decision to save essential metals for the production of munitions during the war. The transition to steel coins was not unique to Canada. Several other countries around the world adopted similar measures to support their wartime economies and needs. Following the conclusion of World War II and the Korean War, the Royal Canadian Mint gradually returned to nickel as the primary component in the 1950s. The shift back to traditional 99.9% nickel composition allowed the Canadian Mint to return to using the round rim design in the year 1963. The advancements in metallurgic technologies allowed for the efficient use of nickel without compromising the coin's integrity, marking the end of steel-based coins for several decades. Now, the date that you are looking for this nickel is 1963, and if you want to be able to identify this era, we should briefly go over how rotated die errors can occur during coin production. Rotated die errors on Canadian coins can be attributed to misalignments or instability during the coin minting process. While it may be challenging to determine which of the two dies is responsible for the rotation, these errors occur for two major reasons: stable rotation and dynamic rotation. First, let's go over stable rotation. This type of rotation occurs when one of the two dies is misaligned during installation, leading to a stable degree of rotation for subsequent strikes. The effect of this is that multiple coins are produced with a consistent degree of rotation, and this misalignment is assumed to be the cause. The second type of rotation is dynamic rotation. Dynamic rotation occurs when one of the dies becomes loose during striking, leading it to rotate in its axis. This type can result in varying degrees of rotation. Coins struck with dynamic rotation may have different degrees of rotation depending on the instability of the rotating die during the striking process. To determine the rotation degree, one needs to measure the rotated side in relation to the other side of the coin. This measurement is crucial for evaluating the extent of the rotation. The Canadian 1963 nickel in coin alignment is an error that involves the coin being rotated 180 degrees during the minting process. In a typical minting process, coins are aligned in a specific way to ensure consistent and accurate strikes. However, in the case of the Canadian 1963 nickel struck in coin alignment, the coin was struck in such a way that the reverse and obverse side are upside down in relation to each other, very similar to American coins. The notable feature of this error is the reverse side of the coin, which features the beaver design, is rotated 180 degrees compared to the obverse side. This coin alignment error is considered a minting anomaly where the coin is improperly aligned during the striking process. Coin alignment errors, especially those involving 180 degree rotations, can generate significant interest among numismatists and collectors. The uniqueness of this error adds a distinctive characteristic to the coin. So, some of the details and specifications for the 1963 Canadian nickel in coin alignment of any of these are off and may indicate that the coin is not authentic. So first, we will start off with the mintage figure for the 1963 Canadian nickel. The 1963 nickel has a mintage figure of 43,970,000, and the 1963 struck in coin alignment is included in that mintage figure. There's probably only a couple hundred examples or less that exist. Now, the specifications for this coin: it is composed of 100% nickel. It has a weight of 4.54 grams, a diameter of 21.21 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.75 millimeters. The obverse was designed and engraved by Mary Gillick, and the reverse was designed and engraved by G.E. Kruger Gray and Thomas Shingles. The edge of the coin is round. It is the first year that they returned to the round rims for Canadian nickels. It is non-magnetic, and the die axis is in coin alignment, as is the standard for American coins, but it is not intended to be in coin alignment. It is a rotated die air. Now, when it comes to determining the value for this nickel, it can be extremely tricky. It is actually listed as an error on PCGS's website, and it is also listed on the Coins in Canada website, but Coins in Canada does not give any evaluations for this coin. Now, PCGS lists a sale on eBay in 2022 where an MS65 example sold for $201, but there have actually been regular 1963s that have sold for way more than that, so I'm not too sure what is going on with that. But if you do find one in an MS65 to MS67, I don't doubt that you might be able to get anywhere from $500 to $1,000 depending on how much somebody wants to add this to their collection. It is a pretty significant error, and if it gets the attribution from PCGS, it will definitely add some interest and garner some attention as well. The Canadian Mint officially ceased production of the penny in the year 2012. The decision to discontinue the production of Canadian pennies was made due to the rising costs of manufacturing and the declining purchasing power of the coin. This marked a significant change in Canada's currency system and sparked a wave of interest among collectors and enthusiasts. The composition and size of the Canadian penny has changed several times throughout the years. The penny was first introduced in Canada in the year 1858 and was first made of bronze. Over time, the composition shifted to copper and eventually to steel coated with copper. The size of the penny has also varied, with the most recent and commonly known version being 19.05 millimeters in diameter, also known as the small cent. Although the penny was not produced for circulation after the year 2012, it is still made for new collector's sets, including specimen and proof sets put out by the Royal Canadian Mint. These sets often include special edition pennies that commemorate significant events and anniversaries. They can also have unique finishes that add visual appeal to the coins. Despite its discontinuation, the penny remains a highly collectible item. Even though they aren't as accessible as they once may have been, you can still find them if you look hard enough. Some of the best places to get pennies to search for these rare and valuable coins in Canada are from the bank, where you would have to go and ask for a $25 box or for some loose rolls and hope that firstly, they actually have some, and secondly, they are willing to break their protocol and give them to you. Unfortunately, in Canada, every financial institution is required to send any pennies anyone has turned in back to the mint to be melted down. Also, companies such as Brinks, who run alloy recycling programs of their own, will also take pennies. Some other places that you can find Canadian pennies to look through are Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, or you can take a trip down to your local coin shop and see if they have any bulk pennies that you can buy. Now, what do you say we discuss the 1965 and 1985 pointed 5 variety Canadian 1 cent coins? The 1965 and 1985 pointed 5 varieties refer to specific varieties of Canadian pennies that were minted in those years. These varieties are sought after by collectors due to their unique design features and also their limited and unknown mintage. The pointed 5 on these pennies refers to the shape of the numeral 5 on the coin, which has a sharper, more triangular appearance on the end of the top of the serif rather than the blunt 5. Some of the factors that contributed to the creation of this coin include changes in minting technology, artistic preferences, and the need to differentiate coins from previous years. But most likely, the Canadian Mint was either just experimenting or they eventually switched their dies and they wanted to differentiate between these switch. Believe it or not, I've actually found some of the large bead pointed 5 1 cent coins in the past. If you guys would like to see that, I definitely suggest you go check out some of my coin roll hunting videos. But another thing you need to look for if you want to find the rarest of the 1965 coins is also the large bead border. In 1965, there are 4 variations of pennies overall, all of which gravitate around the pointed and blunt 5 and also small and large beads. The most rare of all these pennies is the 1965 with the pointed 5 and the large beads, but the small bead pointed 5 is the most valuable in a high grade, so identifying that pointed 5 is the most important thing. To identify it, you need to look at the end of the top serif of the 5 for the final digit in the date 1965. If the 5 looks like it is either slightly angled or comes to a point, then you have the pointed 5. If the 5 is flush or straight and doesn't come to a point, then it is the blunt 5. Then you need to flip over to the obverse of the coin and look at the beads that surround the rim of the coin. I will give some examples of what to look for in terms of the large beads, but the best way that I can say to identify your 1965 large bead pennies is actually to hold on to all your 1965 pennies, look at them all under a microscope or zoom in very close with your phone and compare the bead sizes. As soon as you find one that you know for sure has the large beads, keep that one for reference. And then we also have the 1985 penny. Although this coin was made 20 years later, it actually has the same two variations of the blunt and pointed 5 for its date. The pointed 5 1985 penny is very rare, and it is actually worth more in a low grade state or a beat up condition if you find one of them. But the blunt 5 1985 can actually be worth some really good money if it gets a high grade or it scores in a mint state. To this day, I still have not found one of these 1985 pennies in any condition that would make it worth getting graded or writing home about, but it's definitely a good one to have on your radar. But now that we've given you an idea of what to look for, what do you say we break down the values for the more rare of all these penny varieties, starting with the small beads pointed 5. Now on the low end, the 1965 small beads pointed 5 is not worth too much at all. It's pretty much worth face value if it is at the low end, but this bad boy can be worth all the way up to $1,800. So you see some massive price jumps from that penny. It goes from $285 to $1,810. So I'm guessing that there isn't too many of these that survived in a high mint state. So it is definitely one to keep your eye out for if you find any 1965 pennies in good shape. And then we also have the large bead pointed 5. Now on the low end, this one can be worth around $3.40, even at the very bottom of the Sheldon scale. If it is worn, beat up, and been put through the meat grinder, it is definitely a good one to find, and it can be worth around $13.50 for an AU50. Now in terms of the high end for the large bead pointed 5 1965, it's worth around $21 for an MS60, and this one can be worth all the way up to $1,010. And this is another coin that sees some massive price jumps. So it means very few of these score in the high range. And I have actually found 1965s of all varieties in good shape. So this is definitely a good one to keep your eyes out for. And then we have the 1985 penny. So you are looking for the pointed 5 if you want to make any money on the low end. It isn't worth too much at the bottom of the Sheldon scale, only worth around $1 if it is all beat up, worn, and been put through the meat grinder. It can be worth around $5 for an AU50, and the pointed 5 can be worth up to $267. And then last but not least, we have the 1985 blunt 5 penny. Now this one isn't very valuable at all on the low end. At the bottom of the Sheldon scale, it's not worth much more than face value, but as you start to get into the high range of the Sheldon scale and it starts to get into the mint state range, you start to see some massive price jumps, but it can be worth all the way up to $1,570. Now the price jump there goes from $182 to $1,570. So if you ever submit one of these things, you got to pray and hope to the coin gods that you maybe get an MS65, or you never even know, maybe an MS66, and then this thing could be worth some great money. So there are a whole lot of varieties to look for, but usually you want to look for the pointed 5 varieties, or you want them to be in very good shape if you want to make the most money out of these pennies. To get a good understanding of the rare and elusive 2000p Canadian dime, we first have to travel back to the year 2000, which was a time of optimism and celebration as Canada embraced the dawn of a new millennium. Amid this excitement, the Canadian Mint introduced a coin into circulation that would catch the attention of collectors and coin roll hunters, and that is the 2000p Canadian dime. This coin features the typical iconic blue nose schooner design on its reverse side. The Blue Nose schooner design is a tribute to Canada's rich maritime heritage, and the Blue Nose itself, a legendary racing ship celebrated for its speed and elegance, has become a symbol of national pride. The design first appeared on Canadian 10-cent coins in the year 1937 and has remained the standard dime design until present day. The Blue Nose design has endured for nearly a century as a hallmark of Canadian coinage, admired by collectors the world over. Now, what sets the 2000p Canadian dime apart is not actually its design, but it's the story behind its creation. This coin holds a unique place in Canadian numismatic history as one of the first dimes to feature the P mint or composition mark, a symbol that marks significant changes in both the Canadian Mint's operations and the composition of Canadian coins. The P mint or composition mark, which is located just beneath the bust of Queen Elizabeth II, signifies that the coin was struck using the Canadian Mint's new multiply plated steel technology. The transition from a nickel-based alloy to a new steel core in Canadian coins was a pivotal moment for coin production, not just in Canada, but for the entire world. The Mint aimed at reducing production costs and enhancing the durability of Canada's circulating coins. Now you might be wondering what actually makes the 2000p dime so special. Well, unlike its common counterparts, this coin actually wasn't intended for widespread circulation. While 2000p Canadian nickels were released for circulation with a very low mintage figure of around 5 million, the dimes and quarters featuring the P mint mark were not officially issued for circulation until the year 2001. This makes any 2000p dimes that exist today an accidental release or perhaps the result of testing conducted by the Mint. Some of these coins may have slipped into the wilds of circulation through vending machine companies testing the new compositions or possibly through other experimental purposes. Regardless, the 2000p Canadian dimes were not meant to end up in public hands, and that is where their story began. The exact number of 2000p Canadian dimes produced remains somewhat of a mystery, but it's widely believed that there are no more than 250 of these coins that escaped into the wilds of circulation. This coin's incredible rarity combined with the fascinating circumstances of its release definitely makes it one of Canada's holy grail coins. I have known coin roll hunters who have found coins very similar to these, and there was a lot of chaos at the Canadian Mint around the year 2000, with the change of composition and circulating coins and also the upcoming Millennium Quarter series. Usually during periods of heavy workloads and changes, a few legendary coins will come into existence, and the 2000p Canadian dime is a prime example. Now, to identify one of these rare gems, all you need to do is look for a little P mint or composition mark beneath the Queen's bust on the obverse side of the coin, which was put there to indicate the coin's new steel composition. The reverse will have the typical blue nose schooner design. The common regular issue dimes in the year 2000 will not have the P mint mark, but they will have the same blue nose schooner design with Queen Elizabeth's bust. There were also sets featuring 2000 dated dimes issued from the Winnipeg Mint, and they were issued with a small W mint mark to the bottom right of Queen Elizabeth's bust. These were not intended for circulation and are only worth slightly more than business or circulation strikes, but they are more rare and have fairly low mintage figures. So if you ever find a coin in your pocket change with a W mint mark, you should definitely still hold on to it, but it's actually the P mint mark on the 2000 Canadian dimes that you are looking for. The 2000p Canadian dime is not classified as an heir. Instead, its appeal and value lies in its extreme scarcity and unique backstory. Unlike the infamous 1969 large date dime, which is regarded as the most rare and valuable Canadian circulation dime, the 2000p dime stands out for its rarity and its connection to a pivotal moment in Canadian coinage history. When it comes to value, these coins can fetch impressive sums depending on their condition and the provenance given with the piece. While they might not make you an instant millionaire, their numismatic significance ensures that they are worth far more than their face value. In the hands of an eager collector, these dimes can easily command prices in the hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on their state of preservation. I just wanted to give you guys an important side note. The Canadian Mint did issue limited proof-like sets in the year 1999 featuring the P mint mark. These coins were part of a planned release with a mintage figure of around 20,000, and while they are collectible in their own right, their story is distinct from the 2000p Canadian dime. The real allure of the 2000p dime lies in its accidental release, likely tied to testing purposes, which makes it far more rare and more exciting for collectors. But if you do ever find a 1999 Canadian coin in your pocket change with a P mint mark, you should still definitely hold on to it because it is worth more than the face value. Now, some of the details and specifications for this piece, if any of these are off, it may indicate that it is not a legitimate or authentic example. The composition for the 2000p Canadian dime is 92% steel, 5.5% copper, and 2.5% nickel, which is considered multiply plated steel. It has a weight of 1.75 grams, a diameter of 18.03 millimeters, a thickness of 1.22 millimeters. The designers for the obverse were Dorota Padre Hunt and Augo Aran, and the designer for the reverse was Emmanuel Hahn. The edge of the coin should be reeded, it should be magnetic, and it should also have a die axis and metal alignment, which is the standard for Canadian, British, and Australian coins. Now, what do you say we get into the current market values for the 2000p Canadian dime? Just to give you guys a reference point, if you find a 1999p Canadian dime, whether you pull it out of the set or you find it in your pocket change, it means it will have come from the testing set that was issued in the year 1999. This set was limited to a mintage figure of around 20,000, so it makes the value a little bit more than face. If you were to find one of these 1999p Canadian dimes, it can be worth around $30 for an NBU 66 to 67. So it is obviously worth much more than face value when it gets a high grade, but still not super rare or valuable. The regular issue Canadian 2000 dime without the P mint mark can be worth around $15 for an NBU 66 or a brilliant uncirculated 66 for the business strike. Now, if you were to find a 2000p Canadian dime in your pocket change, so it's pretty beat up and worn, you can easily get anywhere from $50 to a couple $100 for it. Collectors definitely want these things to fill their albums out, and they are pretty sought after. Now, as we start to get into the NBU territory, meaning brilliant uncirculated, it can be worth around $700 for an NBU 60, and the maximum price currently this coin is appraised for is around $3,280 for an NBU 66. If it were to grade any higher, you might see a pretty good price jump. We could easily be talking a $5,000 to $10,000 dime. When it comes to coin collecting or coin roll hunting, Canadian dimes, unfortunately there isn't too much to look for, so this 2000p definitely adds some flavor and spice. These coins, although extremely legendary and rare, are out there and they can be found. Whether you're just casually looking through your pocket change or you go to the bank and you get a box of coin rolls or maybe even just a few loose rolls to search through, these things are out there and some of them are unaccounted for and they are just waiting to be discovered. Die chip heirs such as the Pedestal D, Pedestal S, and Pedestal 0 varieties can be found on the 2000 Canadian Toonies and are intriguing anomalies that captivate both numismatists and collectors alike. Understanding the nuances of each of these varieties requires a keen eye for detail and also an appreciation for the intricacies of the minting process. So what I will do is I will go through each of the 3 different pedestal varieties that can be found on the 2000 Knowledge Toonies, and I will tell you how to identify them, and then we will discuss the values of all of these rare coins. So let's start off with the Pedestal D variety. This variant is distinguished by a minute die chip located on the bottom left of the letter D in the word dollars on the obverse side of the coin. To identify this anomaly, one must carefully inspect the lettering, particularly in the word dollars. The die chip you are looking for should appear as a small protrusion or imperfection, often barely noticeable to the untrained eye. The die chip in the Pedestal D variety can be located to the bottom left of the D in the word dollars. Moving on to the Pedestal S variety. To identify this, you have to direct your gaze towards the bottom center of the letter S in the word dollars on the obverse side of the coin. If you can identify a small die chip at the bottom center of the letter S in dollars, then you have the Pedestal S variety. Identifying these anomalies requires meticulous scrutiny of the coin's surface with a focus on pinpointing any deviations or irregularities in the lettering. And then last but not least, we have the Pedestal 0 variety, which presents a unique die chip error on the reverse side of the coin. So to locate this anomaly, you need to flip over to the reverse and then look at the last digit of 0 in the date of 2000 that is engraved on the coin. If you can find a tiny die chip at the bottom right of the digit 0, it will set it apart from the standard issue Toonies and you will have the Pedestal 0 variety. Now, how exactly do these rare die chip errors come into existence? The creation of die chip errors is a result of various factors inherent in the minting process. During the production of coin dies, which are used to stamp designs onto blank planchettes, imperfections can occur due to wear and tear, improper maintenance, or even minute particles becoming lodged within the coin dies. These imperfections manifest as tiny protrusions or irregularities on the surface of the die, which in turn transfer onto the coins during the striking process. The result is a series of coins featuring these subtle yet distinguishable anomalies, such as the pedestal D, pedestal S, and pedestal 0 varieties found on the 2000 knowledge Canadian Toonies. In the realm of numismatics, these die chip errors add a level of intrigue and complexity to coin collecting. They serve as tangible reminders of the meticulous craftsmanship and inherent variability that is present in the minting process. As enthusiasts continue to seek out these fascinating anomalies, they contribute to the rich tapestry of numismatic history, preserving and celebrating the quirks and intricacies of coinage for generations to come. Now, some of the details and specifications for the Canadian 2000 knowledge Toonies, if any of these are off and may indicate that the coin is not authentic, Canada actually has a huge problem with counterfeit Toonies. It is not too often that you will find general circulation coins that are counterfeited, because usually it will not be profitable. But in the case of the Toonies, it is actually profitable for them to make counterfeits simply because the material that is used is cheaper than the actual face value of the coin. The dates you will usually find for Canadian counterfeit Toonies are 1996, 2000 knowledge Toonies, and also 2005 and 2006. So you definitely want to make sure all of the specifications are bang on if you want to identify any of the pedestal varieties and be able to get the maximum amount of money out of this coin, because if you identify these on a counterfeit, it will be pretty much worthless. So the coin is composed of 100% nickel for the outer ring, and the inner core is composed of 92% copper, 6% aluminum, and 2% nickel. It has a weight of 7.3 grams. It has a diameter of 28.00 millimeters for the exterior and 16.8 millimeters for the center, with a thickness of 1.80 millimeters. It was designed and engraved by Dora DePadre Hunt for the obverse and Cosme Saffioti for the reverse. The edge is interrupted serration, and the die axis is in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins. Now let's get into the value for the different pedestal varieties for these 2000 knowledge Toonies. First, we'll start off with the 2000 knowledge Toonie without any errors or varieties. It can be worth around $2.90 for an MS60, and all the way up to around $150 for an MS67. Now, if you can identify the pedestal D variety, which will mean there will be a small die chip located to the bottom left on the D in the wording for dollars on the obverse of the coin, it can be worth around $5 for an MS63 and all the way up to $350 for an MS66. So the pedestal D variety is about twice as valuable as the regular 2000 knowledge Toonie without any errors or varieties. And then we have the 2000 knowledge pedestal S variety. You can identify this by locating the die chip on the center bottom of the S in the wording for dollars. It can be worth around $5.20 for an MS63 and around $300 for an MS66. It's actually a little bit less valuable and rare than the pedestal D variety, but still worth a lot more than the regular issue without any errors attributed. Now, I wasn't actually able to find any of the pedestal 0 variety price listings online, but if I had to give an estimate, I would say that it is probably similar in price to the other two, probably worth around $300 for an MS66, and it can probably be worth around $5 to $10, all of these, for an MS63 example. When it comes to their low end value, it's pretty much a case of whatever you can get someone to pay for it is what you will get. If the die chip for any of these pedestal varieties is very noticeable, then it may add a slight premium to the coin. Also, if you can compound any of these varieties together, for instance, if it has the pedestal D and the pedestal S variety at the same time, then you will probably also see some price jumps. It could easily double the value of this coin if you're able to get the pedestal D and S variety both attributed to it. I couldn't doubt that you could get easily around $1,000 for it if it is a high grade example around an MS66 or MS67. So these are some good varieties to look for. None of the Canadian Toonies, unfortunately, are worth a whole lot. on the low end. If you can identify any of these errors or varieties for these pedestal Canadian toonies, it's pretty much a matter of they are worth whatever you can get somebody to pay for them. Creating the new design for His Majesty King Charles III's effigy involved a comprehensive and multi-step process. Following the announcement by the Government of Canada, over 350 artists in a database and also mint engravers received email invitations. The artists and engravers that expressed interest provided a portfolio of portrait work for evaluation. A thorough assessment was then conducted for each of the respondents. The short list of artists and engravers were given an artist brief with mandatory design requirements. Design concepts underwent evaluation by an internal mint review panel, assessing the submissions based on aesthetics, technical requirements, and their suitability for mass production. The winning design underwent scrutiny for necessary approvals from both the government and also Buckingham Palace. The mint initiated the engraving and tooling process, involving the creation of dies essential for striking the new coins. Subsequently, the production or striking of the new circulation coins commenced. So it was announced by the Canadian Mint in late 2023 that King Charles III coins would start making an appearance in circulation. So apparently there are some 2023 dated King Charles III coins, but the error that we are discussing today is located on the 2024 King Charles III nickels. Now let's briefly discuss struck through or grease errors. Struck through grease errors happen when grease or other contaminants fill the recesses of a coin die, preventing it from fully impressing the design onto the coin. If grease accumulates in certain areas of the die, those areas may not strike the coin properly, resulting in missing details or a blurry appearance where the grease obstructs the design. The affected area on the coin will typically show missing or distorted features with a flattened or smeared appearance. Now there are several different types of struck through errors. Coins can be struck through wire, they can be struck through fabric. Coins that have struck through wire errors occur when a piece of wire or another foreign object is caught between the dies during the striking process. This foreign object interferes with the normal striking process, preventing the full impression of the design on the coin blank. The wire may also be partially embedded in the coin, leaving an impression on the struck surface. Usually these coins will exhibit a raised line or indentation corresponding to the shape of the wire or object. The affected area may have missing or distorted details depending on the severity of the interference. In both cases, these errors are considered minting anomalies, and their occurrence is typically unintentional. They add an extra level of uniqueness and desirability to the affected coins and can be of great interest to collectors. The degree of rarity and also desirability of these errors depends on several factors such as the prominence of the struck-through feature, the coin's overall condition, and the appeal to collectors seeking these unusual or rare coins. Depending on the severity of the grease error and also if the coin has a visible date can greatly affect the value. But I know from experience that these are some of the most sought after error coins by experienced collectors. I've actually found a 2002 Canadian quarter with a pretty large grease error and I sold it for around $100, and it was honestly one of my most profitable coin roll hunting finds to date. So these are out there and they definitely fly under the radar of anyone who doesn't know how to identify them. In the case of this 2024 nickel, the gentleman who posted about it found this particular coin in a sealed proof set, which to me makes it even more intriguing. Whether he decides to keep it in the packaging or submit the coin to a grading company, its high grade should add another level of value to the error. Now, as is with most coins and collectibles, the value is truly in the eye of the beholder, and it is really worth whatever you can get someone to pay for it. But if I did have to give an estimate, if you were to find an error like this on a 2024 circulation nickel and it was in reasonably good condition, I don't doubt that you could get anywhere from $20 to $30 depending on how severe the grease error appears to be on the coin. In the case of the gentleman who posted about his uncirculated 2024 grease error, I would give his an even higher estimate of around $100 to $500 easily because of the fact that it's sealed and it is the first year for a new monarch being featured on the obverse of the coins. Nickels have always held a special place in the world of coin collecting. In Canada, they've been part of the coinage landscape for over a century. The journey began in the year 1858 when the province of Canada, which included Ontario and Quebec, introduced its first nickel or 5-cent coin, commonly referred to as fish scales by those versed in Canadian numismatics. These tiny little coins had a weight of 1.16 grams and a diameter of 15.5 millimeters and were composed of 92.5% silver. When we fast forward to 1922, Canada decided to switch things up a bit. The Canadian 5-cent coin underwent a transformation. It gained some weight, now coming in at 4.54 grams, and it also increased in popularity because it was now composed of the precious metal nickel and similar in size to the American nickels of the time. The legendary prince of Canadian coins are 5-cent pieces from the year 1921, which are among the rarest and most valuable circulation coins in Canada. The number of known specimens is thought to be somewhere around 400 to 480. The majority of the 1921 mint run was melted down after the Canadian government approved an act in May 1921 enabling the switch to the bigger nickel coin. At an auction in January 2010, the coin that was thought to be the finest known specimen, which was a PCGS graded MS67, sold for $115,000. The Canadian Numismatic Company then sold it to a private collector for $160,000 at the beginning of 2012. By 1937, Canada had decided to give the nickel a makeover, and what better symbol to grace its reverse side than the iconic beaver. The beaver has long been a symbol of Canada's industrious spirit and played a crucial role in the early development of the country. From 1937 until now, the beaver has proudly graced the reverse of our 5-cent coin, with the exception of a few commemorative issues throughout the years starting in World War II. In celebration of Canada's 100th birthday in the year 1967, a special 5-cent coin was issued. This special commemorative coin features the image of a rabbit. This coin is a favorite among collectors, not only for its design, but also for its historical significance. There are some notable errors in the 1967 rabbit nickels and some of the other denominations for 1967s that can be worth some insane amounts of money, but we're going to be covering all of those in a future video. The one tip that I will give you for your 1967 coins is to check if they are out of alignment. Usually Canadian coins will come in metal alignment, meaning the orientation of the obverse and reverse are facing the same way. Sometimes the 1967 coins will come in coin alignment, which is the standard for American coins, and sometimes they will just come with a rotated die, meaning the die could be off axis facing in any direction, and this can add some huge premium to the coin if you can identify it correctly. In the year 1982, the Canadian Mint switched from producing nickels in 100% nickel composition to cupro nickel, which is composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This change was made in an effort to cut costs due to the rising price of precious metals in the global market. Now, you know you're becoming a coin collector when you start referring to your pocket change as potential treasures, and finding a 1996 nickel in your pocket change might just make your day. Coin roll hunters and collectors alike have become aware of a rare Canadian nickel heir from the year 1996 that can be worth some really decent money even if it isn't in the greatest shape. If you were to check the Coins in Canada website a few years ago, you would only see 2 varieties listed for the 1996. These 2 varieties are the near and far 6. Usually you'd be looking for the far 6, and that variety can actually be worth a couple $100s if it hits in the high MS mark. To tell the difference between the near and far 6, you need to look at the final digit 6 in the date 1996, and then look at its proximity and distance to the bottom of the D in Canada. If the 6 is very close to, but not making contact or touching the D, then you have the near 6. If there appears to be a space or gap between the number and the letter D, then you have the far 6, and the far 6 is actually the more valuable of the 2 varieties. But what if I told you that there is a third variety that is actually much more rare and valuable than the previous 2? You could say one 1996 nickel to rule them all, and that is the attached 6 variety. Now, whether due to severe die deterioration, cracks, or any number of other production problems that can occur during the minting process, it would seem that a rare error or variety escaped into circulation. To identify this, you need to look once again at that final digit in the date, and if that 6 is touching or making contact with the D in the inscription Canada, then you have yourself a fairly valuable Canadian nickel. Now, before we get into the value, some of the details and specifications for this coin, if any of these are off, it might indicate that it is not legitimate. And you might think it's actually silly to check all of these little specifications, but you would be surprised at the counterfeit coins that can be purchased online these days. Coins like the 1921 half dollar and 5-cent piece, the 1948 silver dollars, even the 1944 Tomback nickel, and even some minor modern errors and varieties. I've seen listings for all of these counterfeit coins, some of which only sell for $1 or $2. So it never hurts to be thorough, especially if you already went to the work of identifying the attached six. So the specifications for the 1996 nickel: it is composed of 75% copper, 25% nickel. It has a weight of 4.6 grams, a diameter of 21.2 millimeters, a thickness of 1.76 millimeters. The designers and engravers for the obverse of the coin are Dora de Pedri Hunt and Ago Aran, and G.E. Kruger Gray and Thomas Shingles for the reverse of the coin. The edge of the coin is smooth, it is non-magnetic, and it has a diaxis in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. Now, in terms of value, Coins in Canada doesn't actually list low-end price values. The estimate starts kicking in around AU50, and they do evaluate this coin at $134 for an AU50 example, but I do think that it is worth anywhere from $10 to $20 for a G to VG example of one of these coins. People want them. They are definitely a good example of a Canadian error and some significant die deterioration if the D is connected to that 6. Now, when you start to get into the MS mark, you see some pretty high price jumps for this coin. It can be worth around $150 for an MS60, but if you are to look at the FAR 6 1996, that coin can actually be worth $300 for an MS67. So I don't doubt at all that this nickel could easily be worth up to $1,000 to $5,000 for an MS67. If you were to find one that was in a high mint state, your best chance at this point of finding one that is that nice is probably from an uncirculated roll. And never say never, because I have found 1967 rabbit nickel uncirculated rolls from the bank before. These were original bank rolls, so I know that there can be stuff like these 1996s out there. You just need to keep your eyes open, and if you find an uncirculated roll and there is an attached 6 as the ender, the chances are most of the coins inside that roll are going to have the attached 6 variety. Usually when you have an error or variety, most of the coins in the roll will have the variety, or none of them will, because all of the coins are struck and packaged consecutively. So if you do ever happen to come across a 1996 uncirculated roll of Canadian nickels, the first thing that you can look for is this attached 6. And if you do see that on the ender of the roll, I definitely suggest you buy it. But even if the entire roll is FAR 6s and you send them in to be graded and they score an MS66, MS67, it is still a fairly rare and valuable nickel. You do not want the 1996s with the close 6. That one is the least rare and valuable of the 1996 varieties. So if you find any of those while you're coin roll hunting, just chuck them to the side. The Canadian $2 coin, affectionately referred to as the Toonie, made its official debut on February 19, 1996. It was introduced by Minister of Public Works Diane Marleau. This bimetallic coin quickly became a staple in Canadian currency, boasting the highest monetary value of any circulating Canadian coin as of 2024. The reverse side of the Toonie features a striking image of a polar bear by artist Brent Townsend, while the obverse, which was updated in 2023, now bears the portrait of King Charles III with the inscription Charles III D.G. Rex. The Toonie is considered a unique coin due to the patented bimetallic coin locking mechanism used to produce them. They are designed for durability with an estimated lifespan of 20 years, far outlasting the 1-year lifespan of the previous Canadian $2 bills. The journey to the Toonie began with Finance Minister Paul Martin's 1995 budget announcement, which stated that the $2 banknote would be replaced with a coin. The Canadian Mint, under the direction of H.C. Truong, spearheaded the design and engineering of this new and innovative coin. The Toonie was crafted from 2 different metals, an aluminum bronze inner core and a pure nickel outer ring, joined by a bimechanical locking mechanism. An interesting fact is that some of the planchettes used in the initial production of 1996 Toonies were actually manufactured by a German company by the name of Deutsche Nickel. This international collaboration contributed to the production of approximately 375 million coins by the end of 1996 at the Royal Canadian Mint's Winnipeg facility. The Toonie's launch was marked by a special event at Ben's Deli in Montreal, Quebec on February 19, 1996. Unlike the loonie, which coexisted with the dollar bill for a time, the $2 bill was withdrawn from circulation just 3 days before the Toonie's introduction, emphasizing the coin's immediate importance in Canadian currency. The name Toonie itself is a clever play on words which combines "to" and "loonie," which is the nickname for Canada's $1 coin. Despite other suggested names, such as Nanook to honor the Inuit culture, Toonie became widely accepted, so much so that in the year 2006, the Canadian Mint secured the rights to the name to further cement its place in Canadian culture. The community of Campbellford, Ontario, which is home to the coin's designer, constructed an 8-meter tall Toonie monument. The Toonie's introduction is considered a significant milestone in Canadian numismatic history, blending innovative engineering with cultural significance. Now, what do you say we get into the coin that you guys are all here to find out about? The 1996 beaded border Toonie is considered the holy grail of Canadian $2 coins. With only 4 examples currently certified by PCGS, it stands out as the most valuable and rarest Toonie in circulation today. This coin is distinguished by a unique design feature, a ring of beads around the rim on both the obverse and reverse sides of the coin, which sets it apart from the final designs of standard 1996 Toonies. Now, there are 2 primary theories regarding the origin of the beaded border Toonie. First, there is the pattern experiment theory, which suggests that these Toonies were produced as pattern coins, which are typically experimental pieces created to test new designs or minting techniques. Under this theory, the beaded border Toonie was an experimental design that was ultimately not adopted, resulting in only a few coins being produced. The second theory is the early variety theory. This theory states that the beaded border Toonies were an initial design variety intended for circulation but quickly cancelled, leading to most of the struck coins being melted down. PCGS has classified the beaded border Toonie as a test token, though there is no definitive proof or evidence to substantiate this classification. Regardless of its origin, this Toonie remains incredibly scarce, with only 4 known examples. The 1996 beaded border Toonie surpasses the rarity of any other known Canadian $2 coin, making it the most highly prized example of a Canadian Toonie that you can find in circulation. These coins can reach into the thousands of dollars, which only reflects their scarcity and desirability amongst collectors, and identifying a 1996 beaded border Toonie requires careful examination of the coin's rim on the obverse and reverse side. The defining characteristic of this heir is the ring of beads around the rim, which appear on both the obverse and reverse. These small raised dots encircle the outer edge of the coin, which are distinct from the smooth rim of the standard 1996 Toonies. Apart from the beaded border, the rest of the design matches the standard 1996 Toonie, with the obverse featuring Queen Elizabeth II's effigy and the reverse displaying the iconic polar bear design by Brent Townsend. Now, these 1996 beaded border Toonies hold significant value, not just because of their rarity, but also due to the mystery and intrigue surrounding their creation. Whether an experimental pattern or an early design variety that was scrapped, the beaded border Toonies represent a fascinating piece and facet of Canadian numismatic history. If you do ever come across a 1996 Toonie with a beaded border, you might just be holding one of the rarest and most valuable coins of your life. Now, before we get into the values for this coin, some of the details and specifications, if any of these are off, it may indicate that it is not a legitimate example. Now, first, the mintage figure for the Canadian Planchette 1996 Toonie is $315,483,000. They did contract Deutsche Nickel to produce 10 million of the German planchettes for the Canadian 1996 Toonie. The outer ring is composed of 100% nickel, and the inner core is composed of 92% copper, 6% aluminum, and 2% nickel. It has a weight of 7.3 grams, a diameter of 28 millimeters, a thickness of 1.8 millimeters. The coin was designed and engraved by Dora de Pedri-Hun and Augo Arand for the obverse, and Brent Townsend and Augo Arand for the reverse. The edge is serrated and has a diaxis and metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins. The mystery behind the creation of the 1996 beaded border Toonie's design and also its scarcity has significantly increased its interest among collectors. In 2021, one of the 4 known examples was offered for sale for the first time ever. This coin, graded as AU55, sold to the highest bidder for an impressive $4,000. This sale only underscores the significant value and desirability of these beaded border toonies among collectors and numismatists. This coin's unique design, coupled with the extremely limited number of known examples, makes it the most highly sought after prize of the Canadian $2 coins in circulation today. Collectors and enthusiasts alike are drawn to the intrigue surrounding its creation and the challenge of identifying such a rare piece. If you do suspect that you may have found one of these beaded border toonies, it is essential that you have it authenticated by a reputable grading service such as PCGS or ICCS to confirm its authenticity and also potentially unlock its true value. If you were to find one of these and it scored in the mint state range, I don't doubt that you could easily get anywhere from $10,000 to even $100,000 if this coin is in impeccable condition. So make sure to give those old toonies a look over, because you don't want to accidentally let a gem or holy grail slip back into the wilds of circulation and miss out on a potential huge payday.